When my husband died, everyone said I was lucky. They said he left me a mansion in Pretoria and more money than I could ever spend. They said every woman prayed for a life like mine. What they didn't know was that the house never slept. The first week after the funeral, I barely rested. The nights were the worst. The heater ran nonstop, yet the cold clung to my skin like damp clothes. When I finally drifted off, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the passage. I told myself it was grief or imagination, until the footsteps stopped at the same place every night. My husband's room. That door had always been locked. Even during our marriage, I had never entered it. Sifo had warned me gently but firmly, "Never go in there. It's where I work." I trusted him. Now he was dead, and something was walking the halls. One night, when the footsteps returned, I followed them. The sound faded as I reached his door, leaving behind a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. That was when I noticed the key. It lay inside his drawer, placed carefully, as if waiting. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door. The smell hit me first: wet air, old paper, and something bitter beneath it, something that made my stomach turn. The curtains were drawn tight. Papers littered the desk, some torn, others marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Then I saw the box. Large, wooden, covered in a black cloth. I pulled the cloth away. Inside were photographs. Children. Dozens of them. Some smiled awkwardly at the camera. Others looked frightened, their eyes empty, as if they already knew something terrible. I flipped one over. A number. A date. My breath caught. I recognized the faces. These were children whose disappearances had once filled the news, cases that went cold, families left with questions that never had answers. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in. I called his best friend, Pastor Jonas, my voice barely steady. "Please," I whispered, "there's something wrong in Sifo's room." He came that evening. When I showed him the photos, he didn't gasp. He didn't ask questions. He simply stared for a long moment, then said, "Cover the box, lock the door, never speak of this again." Fear crawled up my spine. I demanded the truth. His eyes flicked to the window, then to the door, before he lowered his voice. "Your husband was part of something dark, a group. They used children for money rituals. When he tried to stop, they punished him with sickness. Death was mercy." The world tilted. Sifo, the man who prayed with me, who built boreholes, who donated to orphanages, had built his wealth on innocent blood. The pastor gripped my shoulder tightly. "If you expose this, they will come for you. Leave. Tonight." I obeyed. I fled to my mother's village in Mpumalanga without telling a soul. But the house followed me in my dreams. Every night, children cried. They called my name. They asked why I had seen them, and still ran away. Sleep became torture. Finally, I told a village priest everything. He listened, silent and grave. Then he said, "Silence is how evil survives. If you stay quiet, their suffering continues." The next morning, I returned to Pretoria. I packed the photographs, the black box, and every paper I could find and drove straight to the police station, my heart pounding the entire way. Weeks later, the truth surfaced. My husband's empire collapsed. 3 men were arrested. Pastor Jonas was among them. Families of missing children finally learned what had happened to their sons and daughters. People stopped calling me lucky. They called me brave. But bravery felt nothing like this. It felt hollow. I sold the house. I gave away the money. None of it felt clean enough to keep. One grieving mother hugged me after court and whispered, "You gave me peace." That was when I understood. Silence doesn't protect the innocent. It protects the guilty. Every secret feeds the darkness. Every ignored truth allows evil to grow roots. My husband's secrets nearly destroyed me. Exposing them saved others. So when people ask how I survived, I tell them this: never protect evil because of love. Never let fear steal your voice. When you see something wrong, speak. It may cost you comfort, but it will save your soul. I thought everything would end after the arrests. I was wrong. The first sign came 3 nights after the verdict. I was staying in a small rented flat far from Pretoria, trying to rebuild a life that no longer felt like mine. At exactly 2:17 a.m., unknown number, I answered without thinking. All I heard was breathing. Slow, calm, familiar. Then a child's voice whispered, "You promised to help us." The line went dead. I didn't sleep again that night. The calls continued. Never the same number, always the same time. Sometimes there was crying, sometimes footsteps. Once, I heard my husband's voice whisper my name the way he used to when he thought I was asleep. I changed my number. The calls didn't stop. Objects began to move in my flat. Chairs shifted. Doors creaked open by themselves. One morning, I found muddy footprints leading from my bedroom to the front door. Small footprints. Children's footprints. I went to the police. They found nothing. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no explanation. "You've been through trauma," they said gently, "but trauma doesn't leave fingerprints on mirrors." One night, the power went out. As I lit a candle, I noticed something scratched into the wall beside my bed. Numbers, dates, the same format as the photographs. I fell to my knees. They had followed me. Desperate, I returned to the sold house in Pretoria. I don't know why. Maybe I needed answers, or maybe the house was calling me back. The new owners said they couldn't stay there. They complained of crying at night, of locked doors opening by themselves, of a room that smelled of damp bitterness no matter how often it was cleaned. They handed me a package they found buried beneath the floorboards of my husband's room. Inside was a small notebook, my husband's handwriting. He wrote about dreams, about shadows watching him sleep, about children who stood at the foot of his bed, asking why he chose money over mercy. The last page made my blood run cold. "If she ever finds this, tell her I tried to stop it. But once you feed darkness, it never leaves hungry." That night, the dreams returned, stronger than before. The children no longer cried. They stared. And behind them stood men without faces. I went back to the village priest shaking, barely able to speak. After reading the notebook, he said quietly, "Justice was done in the world of men, but this requires something else." He prayed. He fasted. He warned me. Some doors do not close when you expose them. Some only change direction. Since then, the disturbances have lessened, but they have not stopped. Every now and then, at 2:17 a.m., my window fogs up from the inside. A small handprint appears, then fades. I have learned to live with it, because some truths demand witnesses, not peace. And if my life must remain restless so that innocent souls are not forgotten, then I will endure it. But I warn anyone listening, evil does not always die when exposed. Sometimes it waits, and sometimes it remembers who spoke. I thought the arrest meant the group was finished. I was wrong again. 2 months after Pastor Jonas was sentenced, a woman came to my door. She was dressed plainly, her head covered, her eyes fixed on the ground. "I was told you would understand," she said. Before I could respond, she placed something in my hands and walked away without looking back. It was a photograph, not an old one. It was recent. A child stood in the picture, alive, frightened, holding a piece of cardboard with a number written on it. A number I recognized. It matched one from the black box. My blood ran cold. That night, I noticed the shadows in my flat behaving strangely. They stretched too long, bending against the walls even when I stood still. The air grew heavy, like the moment before a storm. At exactly 2:17 a.m., every mirror in the flat cracked at once. Not shattered. Cracked. As if something had pressed against them from the other side. In the largest mirror, words slowly appeared through the mist of my breath. You spoke. Now we see you. I fled to the village church, pounding on the doors before dawn. The priest looked older than I remembered, his hands trembling as he listened. There were more, he said at last. Men with influence, money, power. They never touch the rituals themselves. They only watch. Where? I asked. Everywhere, he replied. From that day, I felt watched. Cars parked outside my flat with engines running but no drivers inside. Unknown faces at the back of church services. A man who stood outside the school where I volunteered, always reading the same newspaper, never turning a page. Then the dreams changed. The children stopped calling my name. Instead, they pointed behind me. One night, I woke to find muddy water dripping from the ceiling, pooling at my feet. It smelled like the room in Pretoria. Bitter. Rotten. On the wall above my bed, something had been written in charcoal. Not all debits are paid in court. The priest urged me to disappear, to leave the country, change my name, vanish. But before I could, another package arrived. Inside were documents, bank transfers, offshore accounts, familiar names, politicians, church leaders, businessmen who still walked free. At the bottom of the pile was a single note. You can expose us, but you will never outlive us. That night, the house went silent. No footsteps, no whispers, no dreams. Just silence so deep it felt unnatural. At 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up. No caller ID. A man's voice spoke calmly, almost kindly. You did well, he said. Most women choose comfort. You chose truth. My heart hammered. But truth has a price, he continued. You will spend the rest of your life paying it. The call ended. Since then, nothing supernatural has happened. That is what frightens me most. No dreams, no shadows, no signs. Because evil doesn't always haunt. Sometimes it steps back, to remind you it doesn't need to chase what it already owns. I still speak. I still warn. I still help where I can. But every night before sleep, I check the time. And when the clock creeps close to 2:17 a.m., I hold my breath, because I know this now. Some darkness doesn't punish you for speaking. It simply marks you. And waits for the right moment to collect. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.